So thank you very much for inviting me. It's a huge honor. I'm just pressing the wrong button, so I'm sorry for that one. So what am I doing? So I'm heading a center for shared decision making in Denmark that was recently appointed a national center for shared decision making. And I was employed in November 2014, and I'm a medical oncologist by background. So I was taking care of patients in the clinic at half of my time, and then I was trying, like you are doing, to build a center for shared decision making the other half of my time. And we started with research, because I know clinicians, they are often driven by evidence. So if you need to convince somebody to change their behavior or the attitude, they say, well, that's super interesting, but please show me the evidence. Am I going to become a better doctor, or is this going to make an impact for my patients? So we started with research. Many research projects for the first 5 years, it was only major research. Then I work in Denmark, and in Denmark, all hospitals are free. We pay a lot of taxes, but then the all hospital care is free. That means it's a political-led organizations. And then all the politicians in the region say, oh, what are they doing with research? And why are their patients so happy and satisfied? And shouldn't we why is it only research? Why don't we implement it? So after 5 years, the politicians decided that we should implement shared decision making. So now we work both with research and with implementations, but also with knowledge dissemination. So it's been 10 years now, and next week we have celebrating 10 years anniversary. I think I'll put this down here because it's just so. So why am I showing you this picture? I found out usually there's a big gap. So you do research here, and then you have implementation, and there's a big gap from theory to practice. How do you implement something that you do research? I usually say in research, it's only the patients who participate in the research project that benefits from the project. How do you scale it up so this will have an impact of all your patients in your healthcare system? How do you bridge your shared decision-making efforts to randomized trials and research to implementation for all your patients? I see this gap many times, and sometimes you call things a project. And when you call things a project, there's a start date and an end date. And the clinicians will say, now we are finished with the project, we move on to something else. So you need to think about implementation of shared decision-making as something else than a project. It's actually here to stay. So let's look at, is this something patient wants? If you are trying to convince your doctors and nurses and psychologists and hospital administrators, you need to show that your patients, they're actually asking for this. So just let me show you some Danish numbers. This is a survey, it was conducted in 2016, so it's actually 8 years old, and they asked 6,000 Danish patients about there were many questions in this survey. It was about the Danish population's expectations for healthcare and their experiences. And one of the questions was, who would you want to make decisions about treatment if you were in one of the following situations? And let me walk you through this slide. So the dark blue here is where patients said, I will make the decisions. I'm the patient, I will make the decisions. The light blue here, patients said, my opinion as a patient is of higher value, but the decisions should be made together with the doctor. The light red here, patients say, well, the doctor's opinion is of higher value, but the decisions must be made in collaboration with me as the patient. And then on the right side, it's where the patient said the doctor should make the decisions. So what do you see here? This one, top one, seems to be different from the other situations. That these were in acute situations where patients would maybe come into the emergency room with a heart attack or a brain bleed. Then they say, please, go ahead, you're the doctor, please do whatever you want. But in all the other situations, around maybe 90% of all patients say, I want to make decisions together with the healthcare staff. It could be in complicated course where you have 5 different diseases at the same time. It could be in chronic diseases like sclerosis or diabetes. It could be rehabilitation. It could be planned surgery, new hip or new knee, but also in life-threatening diseases like cancer. So Danish patients say, well, please, I want to be part of the decisions. Don't make decisions about my healthcare without me. Very strong indication that patients want this. So I think I would advise you to make this kind of national survey to show that Korean patients are actually asking for shared decision making. Another question was, who do you mostly agree with concerning healthcare decisions? And 3 out of 4 says, well, in general, I feel more safe as a patient when all possibilities are presented and I decide what will happen. I could also ask you, what if you become patients yourself? I can also pose the question differently. Would you, if you were patients and I were the doctor, would you like me to know about what is important to you? And what are your preferences? And what are your expectations? Or should I decide? So how many of you will say, please, Karina, you just decide? Put your hands up. How many will say, Karina, I would like you to know more about my lifestyle and my preferences when we decide about treatment? How many of you would like that to happen? Yeah. So many more of you would like me to know more about you. So then we went back and asked Danish cancer patients. This was, I think, 4,000 patients were asked in cancer care whether they would like to be engaged in shared decision making. And 3 out of 4 cancer patients, they prefer decisions about treatment to be made together with their doctor or clinicians based on information about treatment, options, possible side effects, and the patient's preferences. However, 1 out of 3 Danish cancer patients feel that they are not sufficiently involved in decisions about treatment or care. So, we have a lot of buzzwords and evidence, and we know patients want it and they're not experiencing it. So what's the gap? So why aren't we doing it? And so sometimes action is missing. There is this gap from what we know patients are requesting and what we are actually doing in real life. So how do we bridge this gap? And I think that's why will try to show you. I am not having the solution to the big gap, but I can make some steps that we can make the gap a little bit less deep. And what are the barriers? I think in the next slide, I will show you the usual suspects, the usual barriers to shared decision making. This is not a European thing or Canadian thing or German thing. I think you will see the exact same thing here in Korea about implementation barriers. This one is a big one. We're doing it already. I'm a doctor. I've been a doctor for, 25 years. I've been doing this from day one. That's what my colleagues think. And we're being nice to patients. We're talking nicely to them. But if we don't understand what shared decision making really is, then we don't understand that we're not really doing it the way it's supposed to be done. It's too difficult. I don't have time. If I start practicing this, I will never get home to my kids. It will take forever. And this should not be seen as bad excuses, because this is what you will see. So you need to take all these barriers really seriously and address them one by one. It could be lack of accessible knowledge about methods. What is it? I don't have the skills and experience. I don't know how to practice it. There are no support for patients and professionals. There are no patient activation. I don't have any training. Well, and then a good one, it doesn't fit my clinical system and workflows. It doesn't, how do I integrate shared decision making in journals? What we're working with right now is how can we document shared decision making in the electronic medical charts? How do we document that we had a shared decision making discussion with a patient? Doesn't fit the journals, or it took us almost 2 years to change the documentation, the electronic medical charts. And there's a lot of strategy for implementation, and now I'm looking at you because it's really important that we can see that we are going here why we are going here and what's the impact. So please take this list of implementation barriers pretty seriously, because I think you will see it. So now I would like you to introduce you. I hope this video works, otherwise I will need some help to have it work. This is a colleague of mine, Troels. He's also a medical oncologist. He used to work at my hospital when we started implement shared decision making, and he was like this. He thought, well, I'm doing it already, and my patients are too fragile, and I'm just interrupting his workflows, and he saw all the barriers. He was not a fan. Not a fan. Then we engaged him in research in shared decision making. I had him co-develop a patient decision aid, and now he says, I'm a believer. Something happened to his mindset. So we recorded a video with him telling to you what does it mean to him as a doctor to practice shared decision making. And now he works at another hospital. In Denmark, there are 5 regions. I work in the southern region. Now Troels, he work in the mid region, the central region, where they have not implemented shared decision making. So he's trying to take it there and implement it. Let's see what he says. Uh-oh. Yeah, but there should be sound.
Det, jeg synes, der har været allermest spændende ved at komme her til Gødstrup fra Vejle, hvor jeg havde noget erfaring med at arbejde i fælles beslutningstagning i det daglige, det har været med til at indføre det på en ny afdeling, og været med til at undervise nye kollegaer, været med til at se det vokse, hvordan man lige pludselig har sat fokus på at bruge fælles beslutningstagning i hverdagen, og ikke mindst bruge samtalemodellen. Altså, det der med at øve sig i, og patienterne har et valg, at de skal blive bevidste om, at de har et valg. Meget nøgternt fremlægge for dem, hvad de har af valgmuligheder, få afdækket deres præferencer, og så tage den her beslutning sammen med dem. Ikke også? Det synes jeg, det har været med til at være en spændende rejse at være med på. Og det kan jeg mærke nu her, det begynder at slå igennem på afdelingen. Det er nu, vi begynder at snakke om det i vores konferencer. Folk tager eksempler med til konferencen om, at her har jeg brugt fælles beslutningstagning. Så det har sådan været den første del af rejsen. Den næste del, som vi er gået i gang med nu her, det er så at lave beslutningshjælperen inden for 4 områder, hvor vi kigger inden for koloncancer, altså tarmkræft, lungekræft, ægstokskræft og så brystkræft. Så det er sådan den næste del af rejsen, vi tager hul på. Der, hvor jeg virkelig synes, at fælles beslutningstagning gør en forskel i forhold til samarbejde med patienterne, det er det her meget mere fokus på patientpræferencer. Altså den der nysgerrighed på at finde ud af, hvad betyder noget for mine patienter. Det synes jeg altså er blevet meget mere udtalt, at jeg har det fokus nu. Og så tænker jeg også, at det gør det nemmere at bruge samtalemodellen, bruge fælles beslutningstagning, når man skal til- eller fravælge behandling. Altså det, man har patienten med, ikke også? Og det gør, jeg tror, alt andet lige også, det gør det nemmere for patienterne at ligesom være tro over på den beslutning, de har været med til at tage. Altså jeg tror på, at compliance er højere, når man selv har været med til at tage beslutningen. Så det synes jeg, det er en helt afgørende forskel, når man er vant til at bruge fælles beslutningstagning i sin hverdag. Nu kommer jeg også fra at have brugt beslutningshjælp, men det glæder mig til, når vi udvikler dem her i Gødstrup også, at vi skal til at bruge dem. Fordi jeg nåede jo til en situation, hvor jeg kom fra, hvor jeg brugte det i min hverdag at sige, at jeg vil faktisk hellere have det med, end ikke at have det med. Og der er jo mange, man skal lige komme i gang med det, men finde ud af det, at det er faktisk et stærkt værktøj at bruge sammen med patienterne. Det, jeg synes, der er allervigtigst, når man skal i gang med fælles beslutningsdagen, det er faktisk, at man har opbakning fra sin ledelse. Ikke også, der skal sættes tid og ressourcer af til at komme i gang med det. Man skal undervise, så alle på afdelingen ligesom kommer i gang med det samtidig. For det er der, man sikrer, at man får den der udveksling af erfaring med fælles beslutningsdagen. Og det taler nok ind i det her med, at det skal være en kulturændring. Ikke også? Altså det, som jeg sagde, at man begynder at drøfte på konferencer. Her har jeg brugt det til en god samtale med en patient. Udskrivelse af en patient. Skal man hjem? Skal man hospice? Skal man noget andet? Altså, det er jo den der erfaringsudveksling, der er brug for, når man kommer i gang med det. Og så tror jeg måske, det allervigtigste, det er, at man starter i det små. Altså gør nogle enkelte ting. Det kan være, at man siger, at i den næste uge, der vil jeg altså være sikker på, at mine patienter de er klar over, at der er et valg, de skal være med til at træffe. Ikke også? For ellers så er man ikke helt lige så skarp på at høre om de muligheder, der er. Ikke også? Så det er blevet for eksempel bevidst om, at der er en valgsituation. Ikke også? Og så kan det være ugen efter, man siger, at nu vil jeg have fokus på, at nu er det de forskellige valgmuligheder, jeg vil være sikker på at få informeret om på en god og nøgtern måde. Ikke også? Og endelig i sidste ende, når man så kommer i gang med at bruge en beslutningshjælper. Men det er så vigtigt, at det er mindsetet, der er det allervigtigste. Det er, at man gerne vil bruge fælles beslutningstagen. Det er samtalemodellen, som man kan bruge stort set altid. Og så har man nogle specielle situationer, hvor vi bruger en beslutningshjælper, hvor det giver god mening at udvikle det.
I think we'll just skip it here because it doesn't work the same when you can't hear what he's saying, even though it's in Danish. So, I want to show you this picture because this is where I've seen things go wrong as well when you implement shared decision making. And sometimes it's important that you focus on several elements, like you showed the 6 talk and all the elements that you are focused on in Fritz in the share to care model. It's important to focus both of shared decision making development in the team. It's about training the leaders. I'll come back to how important leadership is. It's about teaching the teachers or you're teaching the clinicians with the video. It's about patient decision aids. It's about teachers that maybe can go back and train their own colleagues. It could be about planning how the whole implementation phase. What are all the stepping stones from you have the idea to this is what your patients experiences all the way. And it could be about patient education as well. You need to prepare patients to be ready to engage in shared decision making. So there are so many elements and you need to work with many of them. I've seen initiative with implementation of shared decision making where they focus on one thing. And many, they love patient decision aid. It's such a physical thing. You can have fun developing it and it's a lot of fun. And then you zoom into this. I've seen this in strategy plans, even in the top political level. And they zoom into patient decision aid. But what happens if you zoom into this and only do patient decision aids? This is what is going to happen to your SDM implementation. You need to focus on several key elements to really implement shared decision making. So you showed the share to care model. This is what we have done where I work in the region of Southern Denmark. While we were implementing, we developed this shared decision making hospital model. And we are also doing 4 different things that are very similar to the share to care model in Germany. So, but we are training the leaders. And I have another video, I'll just skip that, but that says how much leadership is important. Leadership that needs to be in front. It's probably when I'll stay an extra days here and several extra days here in Seoul. I'm sure I will see a tourist guide walking with the umbrella. And you see everybody behind, follow, this is the way we are going. This is what the leaders need to do. They need to take the umbrella and lead the way, pave the way, find the resources. Otherwise, the clinicians will not follow. Leadership is, in my opinion, a key overlooked element for implementation of shared decision making. Then we train the teachers and they train the clinicians. So we do train the trainers. And then we build patient decision aid. We have a template from where we can build a lot of different patient decision aids from the same generic template. And then we have a process for shared decision making. So it takes almost a year to implement shared decision making, for example, in a clinical department. So we have like a standard model. We start training the leaders and then we start training the teachers, then they train the clinicians, and here we build patient decision aids, and here we have these meetings with standard agendas. So we have like a process. And they have 3 different layers. We have something that's called shared elements that everybody should do. Then we have recommended what we think they really should do. And then we have local adaptation. I will explain much more detail about this model tomorrow, but just show you this is how we implement shared decision making. Let's look at that one, the overlooked one. I had a video, but I'll just tell her what she's saying. So this is Charlotte. Odbøl. And I said there were 5 Danish regions. She used to work in the North region of Denmark. And they had not implemented shared decision making either. But we got some funding money. So I had some of my employees I could send out as consultation agents. And they went to Charlotte's department to help her implement shared decision making in an oncology department in the very north of Denmark, in a city called Aalborg. And she was the boss in the oncology department, the chief physician, and she welcomed my staff into her apartment. Now she's my boss. Since May 2014, she's now the chief medical officer at the hospital where I work. I'm not sure, maybe it was shared decision making who made her move from the north of Denmark to, I don't know. But we recorded a video with her while she was the boss at the oncology department in north of Denmark. And she speaks about the importance of leadership, about the umbrella, but she also says, well, in the beginning, you have a model, you train all your physicians, and then every day hits you. You're busy. There are a lot of parallel projects that need to be implemented as well. And she says, if this is here to stay, you as the boss, you need to pave the way. You need to talk about shared decision making at all your meetings. So if this were your conference room, there needs to be in something on the wall. You need to talk about shared decision making at staff meeting, at classes, at universities. You need to talk about shared decision making at every little meeting that takes place in your department. So leadership is key. You really need to make the leaders go in front to think about training your leaders. Put the bosses on shared decision making classes to begin with. So I'm sorry I can't show you the video. I think it will just be boring when it's no. So let's go to, I promised to tell you how do we measure shared decision making. So in Denmark, there's a national survey. Every year we survey 250,000 Danish patients about their experiences with healthcare. So 250,000 Danes. And they are asked 10 central questions. It could be like general satisfaction, but one of the questions is about shared decision making of those 10 national questions. And in general, Danish patients are happy. We used to be the most happy country in the world, but now Finland is the most happy. But 88% of Danish patients are satisfied, either to a high or very high degree with the hospital service. But the 10th question, the one every year with the lowest satisfaction, is patients are involved in decision making about diagnostics or treatment when needed. It's not bad, but it's always among the 10 questions that score the lowest. So we still have an improvement, way for improvement in Denmark. So if we take the same questions that were asked nationally, something happened at the hospital where I work. This is the results from 2017 where we can look back. And there was a question, the questions were a little bit different at that time. There was a question, patients were asked, do the staff give patients opportunity to participate in decisions about treatment? And on a scale from 0 to 5. In 2015, they scored 4 on average. And then the next year, they scored 4.34. And then there's another question, does the staff give relatives opportunity to participate in decisions about treatment? In 15, they scored 4.10. And then in 2016, they scored 4.44. And the national average that those years, both in 15 and 16, were around 4.0. So what happened since they increased so much from 2015 to 2016? Well, we trained all the oncologists in shared decision making. I can't say that is the only reason, but something dramatically happened in that specific oncology department. We implemented shared decision making. What else do we do? You said you use PICS and you use mapping SDM. We say to our department, you have to measure at least 2 different things. Here's a long list of instruments you can use. Choose what you would like in your department. We use option 12 a lot. I think it's one of the most valid instruments that you can do to measure shared decision making. But please be aware it also costs a lot of resources. This is an observer instrument. So if I was talking to Fritz and he was my patient, I needed a Nick to sit on the side and observe what we were talking about. So it needs an extra person in the room, and it requires a lot of resources. But it's one of the most valid instruments, and it doesn't have any stealing effects. Many of the other measurement instruments, patients are very satisfied, so they always, score 4 or 5 on a scale to 5. So it's hard to measure any improvement when there's stealing effects. So option 12 is much better to measure improvement, but it's resourceful. So one of the studies we did, we used option 12 to measure, did something change? And then we developed some patient decision aids, one for patients that were coming into the hospital with suspicion of lung cancer. They just had little thing on one lung. Probably it was not cancer. The risk of it was cancer was maybe 1 or 2%. And then they have to decide whether they would have a biopsy or go for PET CT or have a bronchoscopy, and whether they would want some diagnostics. And it was also for breast cancer patients that needed to decide about the breast cancer treatment. And then we measured business as usual. We didn't do anything. Baseline, just observe. And then we trained the doctors and we make them use patient decision aids. And then we observed with option 12 again. And this is what happened. This is before. On the option scores up to 48, and they scored like 11. On the scale to 0 to 48, they scored 11. They were doing a lousy job with shared decision making. And then afterwards, they scored almost 25. So the improvement was probably you even in the back can see they improved a lot in shared decision making with a p-value of 0.0001. So it really made a difference. What about real life? Now this is not research. This is what happened at the hospital. So here we went in to see what happens in neurology, the neurology outpatient clinic. We did option 12 again, and we have divided option 12 into 4 categories, whether they discuss choices, do they discuss options, do they discuss preferences, or is it a decision talk, what we call the 4-step conversation model. This is before we trained the clinicians and had them use patient decision aids, and this is after. So they improved at all 4 elements. And this is real life data. This is from last year at the neurology department at Kolding Hospital. I think this was just a glimpse of what I'm trying to show you that we are doing both in research and implementation. So thank you. I'm looking forward.